All right, today I would like to talk about prostitution. Now, most of you might think, hey, prostitution is a non-issue. I mean, it's not legal in most of the United States. I mean, how is it really an issue? Well, I'd like to state that because prostitution is illegal in our society, we have unsafe working environments for prostitutes and their clients. Prohibition of prostitution creates unnecessary government waste and expense. Police action against prostitution is currently ineffective, and because of all these reasons, we should reevaluate our stance on prostitution. First, I'd like to talk about the unsafe work environment for prostitutes and clients. One of the major issues is that because prostitution is illegal, there's no regulation for monitoring STDs. Now, this dramatically increases the transmission of STDs among prostitutes and their clients. Also, it creates an issue of violence towards women. A report done by the Independent Institute states that it is estimated that if prostitution were legalized in the United States, the rape rate would decrease by roughly 25% for a decrease of approximately 25,000 rapes per year. Now, clearly legalizing prostitution would reduce the violence towards women. Next, I'd like to talk about how the prohibition of prostitution creates unnecessary government waste and expense. First of all, prostitution is really expensive to enforce. An article by the LA Times states that law enforcement agencies in America's biggest cities spend an average of about $2,000 for each arrest of a prostitute, which amounts to more than $120 million a year in enforcement costs nationwide. Now, that's just in major cities. That's not all of the US, so you can imagine how much police force and how much funds actually go towards prostitution busts, and it's a huge government expense for what many consider to be a victimless crime. Next, prostitution creates, the illegalization of prostitution creates an underground untaxed market. For instance, Germany, where prostitution is legal, has an estimated 400,000 professional prostitutes with annual revenues reportedly reaching $18 billion US. This is according to Canadian Business Magazine. Now, that's a huge amount of money that could be taxed, and that tax money could be used for purposes such as cleaning up youth off the streets and good public service. Next, I'd like to talk about how police action against prostitution is ineffective. First of all, prostitution is never going away. Prostitution has been considered by some to be the world's oldest profession, and an article in Sabotage Times states that today the sex trade continues as it always has, with many governments officially maintaining its illegality, while some restrict certain sex trade related activities and others keep it legal and regulated. The fact is, no society has completely eradicated prostitution. So why are we putting our funds, why are we putting our police force into doing what has historically been known to be impossible? Now, the next is that police force can actually increase prostitution. According to the Department of Justice, increased police enforcement temporarily reduces the number of prostitutes on the street, but they usually reappear in new areas. This may actually increase street prostitution in the long term by creating new opportunities for prostitutes and potential clients to meet. So policing prostitution is just increasing prostitution. So that's a huge issue. Now, clearly that this problem is inherent to the fact that prostitution is illegal and that we're policing it. A book written called Prostitution and Sex Trafficking states that criminalization forces prostitution into the underworld. Legislation would bring it into the open, where abuses such as trafficking and underage prostitution can be more easily tackled. So the issue is the fact that it's illegal. Now, we're stating a plan of action where we legalize prostitution in registered brothels in the United States. We regulate the wearing of condoms and regular STD checking, and we modify the tax code to list prostitution under the service industry so that we can tax it. Now, the result of this, to tie it to other examples, areas in Nevada have legal prostitution. And in March 1988, in an effort to prevent the transmission of HIV, the Nevada legislature enacted a mandatory condom law requiring condoms during all brothel sexual activity. This is according to the US National Library of Medicine. That law clearly reduces STDs by preventing the transmission of, by creating it mandatory to wear condoms. Next, our plan would reduce violence in society. According to the Journal of Interpersonal Violence, they concluded that by arguing that legislation brings a level of public scrutiny, official regulation, and bureaucratization to brothels such that violence is far less likely to be a systematic problem as it is when prostitution is illegal but flourishing. Therefore, if we legalize prostitution in registered brothels, we'll reduce violence. Next, by modifying the tax code, we would bring in a huge amount of money to the US economy and eliminate all the expenses of maintaining the prohibition on prostitution. According to MSN Money, the government would gain about $6 billion in federal income tax from, quote, the girls, plus nearly $2 billion more in licensing fees. Clearly, this would be good for the economy. Thank you.